Every single morning, before you eat a single bite of food, before your body has had any fuel, any fiber, any protein, you pour a hot cup of coffee and you drink it. And you have been doing this for years, maybe decades. And every morning something happens inside your body the moment that first sip goes down, something that starts in your mouth and moves through 6 different organs one by one. And most people have absolutely no idea what that chain reaction actually looks like from the inside. That is exactly what we are going to walk through today. Not in a scary way, not to tell you to stop drinking coffee, but because understanding what is actually happening inside your stomach, your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, your adrenal glands, and your brain when you drink coffee, before eating anything, that understanding changes how you use coffee. And when you use it the right way, the same cup that was silently working against you every morning becomes something that actively works for you instead. So let us start from the very first second that coffee enters your body and follow it organ by organ, all the way through. The moment coffee touches your mouth, your body knows something is coming. The bitter compounds in coffee trigger your salivary glands and send a signal down to your stomach. Prepare acid. Food is on the way. Your digestive system begins activating before you have swallowed a single drop. And in a healthy system with food arriving moments later, this is exactly how it is supposed to work. The body anticipates, prepares, and receives. The problem begins when the preparation happens, but the food never comes, because you are not eating. You are only drinking coffee. And what happens next is where things get complicated. The first organ that responds directly is your stomach. Coffee, even black coffee with 0 sugar and 0 calories, is a powerful stimulator of gastric acid. Your stomach begins producing hydrochloric acid in response to coffee the same way it would if a full meal were arriving. Except there is no meal. There is nothing in there except the acid itself, and the stomach lining it is now pressing against. For most people with healthy stomachs, this is not immediately dangerous. The stomach has a protective mucosal lining designed to handle acid, but that lining is not invincible. For people who are already prone to acid reflux, gastritis, or stomach sensitivity, and far more, Americans have these conditions and realize it, that acid production without a food buffer creates real recurring damage over time. You get the burning, you get the bloating, you get the nausea that you have probably blamed on the coffee itself, when what you are actually feeling is your stomach lining being bathed in acid with nothing to neutralize it. And there is another mechanism in the stomach that most people never hear about. Coffee relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter, the valve between your esophagus and your stomach that is supposed to stay closed and keep acid from traveling upward. When you drink coffee on an empty stomach, that valve loosens, acid rises, and you feel it in your chest and throat. As heartburn, the more frequently this happens, the more irritated that esophageal lining becomes. This is not a dramatic one-time event. It is a slow, quiet erosion that happens one empty stomach cup at a time over months and years. Now let us move to the second organ, your liver. Your liver is doing something specific every morning before you eat. It is releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream, a process called hepatic glucose production, as part of your body's natural waking mechanism. Your brain needs fuel, your muscles need fuel, and your liver provides it before breakfast arrives. This is normal. This is healthy. But when caffeine enters your bloodstream on an empty stomach, it stimulates the release of adrenaline from your adrenal glands. And adrenaline sends a direct signal to your liver: release more glucose, right now. So your liver, which was already releasing a controlled amount of glucose as part of its normal morning rhythm, now releases significantly more. Your blood sugar rises, not because you ate anything, not because you had sugar in your coffee, simply because caffeine on an empty stomach triggered a hormonal chain reaction that ended at your liver. And if this is happening every single morning for years, and you are someone who already has any degree of insulin resistance or blood sugar sensitivity, that daily artificial spike is a burden your metabolism was not designed to carry repeatedly without consequence. The third organ is your gallbladder, and this one surprises most people. Your gallbladder stores bile, a digestive fluid your liver produces that is essential for breaking down fats. Bile is supposed to be released when food, specifically fat-containing food, enters your small intestine. The signal that triggers that release is a hormone called cholecystokin, or CCK, which your gut produces in response to fat and protein arriving. Here's what research has confirmed: coffee, both regular and decaffeinated, also triggers CCK release and causes your gallbladder to contract by roughly 30%. In other words, coffee tells your gallbladder to squeeze and release bile even when there is no food to use it. On its own, this is not catastrophic. In fact, this is one of the reasons regular coffee drinkers have lower rates of gallstone disease. Coffee keeps the gallbladder contracting regularly, which prevents the bile from stagnating and forming stones. That is genuinely protective. But here's the problem specific to the empty stomach situation. When bile is released with no food present, it was nowhere useful to go. It enters the small intestine, it causes cramping and urgency, and in sensitive individuals it contributes to that uncomfortable loose feeling many people experience after their morning coffee before breakfast. That is not a food intolerance. That is your gallbladder doing its job at the wrong time. The fourth organ is your pancreas. Your pancreas has two jobs that are both relevant here. It produces digestive enzymes to break down food, and it produces insulin to manage blood sugar. When coffee raises your blood sugar through the liver mechanism we just discussed, your pancreas responds by releasing insulin to bring it back down. Every time, without fail. That is its job. The concern is what happens when this occurs daily, before food, before fiber, before protein, all of which would normally slow and moderate that blood sugar rise and the insulin response that follows. Over time, frequent unnecessary insulin spikes in the absence of food contribute to the kind of metabolic wear that researchers associate with increasing insulin resistance. Your pancreatic beta cells, the cells that produce insulin, are not limitless. They have a finite capacity, and they work best when they are responding to real, sustained metabolic need, not being triggered repeatedly by a hormonal cascade that started with a cup of coffee before breakfast. This is the mechanism that your body is managing silently every morning while you feel fine and think nothing of it. The fifth is your adrenal glands, and this is the connection that ties everything together. Your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and they are responsible for producing two of the most powerful hormones in your body, cortisol and adrenaline. Both of these hormones are part of your stress response system, and both of them are triggered by caffeine. Here is what matters specifically about the empty stomach and the morning timing. Cortisol naturally peaks in the first 30 to 45 minutes after you wake up. This is called the cortisol awakening response, and it is your body's own natural alertness system. It is what is supposed to give you energy to start the day before coffee ever enters the picture. When you drink coffee during this cortisol peak, you are adding a chemical stimulant right on top of a hormonal peak that is already doing the job on its own. The result is a cortisol level higher than either coffee or your natural rhythm would have produced alone. Now, cortisol on its own is not a villain. Short term, it is essential. But chronically elevated cortisol, which is what happens when you repeat this pattern every single morning for years, is directly linked to elevated blood sugar, increased fat storage around the abdomen, disrupted sleep, heightened anxiety, and progressive adrenal strain. Your adrenal glands are being asked to perform a stress response every morning before your body has received any food, any hydration beyond coffee, or any signal that the threat is past. They do it because that is their function. But no system performs optimally when it is activated before it has been properly resourced. The sixth and final organ is your brain, and this is where it gets fascinating. Caffeine works in the brain by blocking adenosine receptors. Adenosine is the chemical that accumulates during waking hours and makes you feel tired. When caffeine blocks those receptors, you feel alert. This is well understood. But what is less discussed is that on an empty stomach, caffeine is absorbed into the bloodstream significantly faster than it would be with food present. That faster absorption means the caffeine hits your brain harder and faster, producing a sharper spike in alertness, but also a sharper crash. The jitteriness, the anxiety, the racing heart, the sudden drop in energy 2 hours later, these are all direct consequences of caffeine hitting a fasted brain at full speed with no food to moderate the absorption curve. And there is a gut-brain connection worth understanding here too. Your gut contains more than 100 million neurons and communicates directly with your brain through the vagus nerve. When coffee disrupts your gut environment, triggering excess acid, premature gallbladder contraction, and altered motility before food, those signals travel directly up to your brain. Anxiety, mental unease, and mood disruption after morning coffee are frequently not about caffeine sensitivity. They are gut-brain axis responses to a digestive system being activated without the resources it needed. Now here is the part that matters: what to actually do about all of this. Rule number 1, and it is the rule that changes everything for most people. Drink water first, before anything else. Your body wakes up in a mild state of dehydration after 6 to 8 hours without fluid. Your stomach acid is more concentrated. Your cortisol is already elevated. Even 8 ounces of water before coffee gives your stomach a buffer, begins the hydration process, and slightly moderates the cortisol spike that caffeine would otherwise amplify. Rule number 2, eat something before your first cup, but it does not have to be a full meal. 1 egg, a small piece of cheese, a few bites of plain yogurt, something with protein. Protein slows gastric emptying, which means the coffee enters your system more gradually. Your blood sugar rise is moderated. Your gallbladder has actual fat and protein to work with. Your stomach acid has something to interact with other than its own lining. The entire cascade we walked through today becomes measurably less disruptive with one simple protein source before the cup. Rule number 3, delay your coffee by 60 to 90 minutes after waking. This is the change that many people find most impactful and most surprising. When you wait until your natural cortisol peak has begun to decline before introducing caffeine, you are not fighting your own biology, you are working with it. The coffee arrives just as your natural alertness is tapering. It extends the alert window. And because cortisol is no longer at its peak, the combined hormonal load on your adrenal glands is significantly lower. People who make this one change consistently report that the same cup of coffee feels more effective, lasts longer, and produces far less of the anxiety and crash they had accepted as normal. Rule number 4, pay attention to what your body is specifically telling you. If you experience heartburn, nausea, loose bowel movements, anxiety, or blood sugar instability after morning coffee, those are not random symptoms. Those are your organs giving you real-time feedback about the timing and context of your coffee consumption. They are not a sign that coffee is bad for you. They are a sign that coffee on an empty stomach, at that volume, in that timing window, is not working well with your specific biology. Here's what I want you to walk away understanding from everything we covered today. Coffee is not the enemy of your stomach, your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, your adrenal glands, or your brain. Used correctly, it is one of the most researched and consistently beneficial dietary habits an adult can have. The science on long-term coffee consumption and organ health is genuinely remarkable protective effects on the liver, the gallbladder, the brain, the cardiovascular system. The evidence is real and it is robust. But the difference between coffee that protects you and coffee that quietly erodes you is not the coffee itself. It is the context in which it enters your body. It is whether your stomach has a buffer. It is whether your blood sugar has a moderating influence. It is whether your cortisol is being compounded or complemented. It is whether your gallbladder has food to work with or is contracting into emptiness. The same cup, the same coffee, completely different biological story depending on what comes before it. Now you know what that story looks like from the inside, organ by organ, mechanism by mechanism. And knowing it is the first step to using one of the world's most beloved beverages in a way that your body will thank you for every single morning for decades to come. If this video gave you a clearer picture of something that happens inside you every day, share it with someone who starts every morning the same way you did. And subscribe to Wellness Over Time, because this is exactly the kind of conversation that belongs here.